Four Texas whiskeys sit in front of me waiting to be reviewed. But is Texas putting out whiskey for the quick money grab, or have they laid their permanent foundation in the industry? Alright guys, so the four different whiskeys sitting in front of me today were sent over from Ironroot Republic. We have their Promethean and we have their Harbinger. And then from Saints Alley, which is a partnership between Ironroot and YouTube Zone Liquor Hound, we have the Nobleman and the Herald. Let's see, guys, what these four different Texas whiskeys have to offer. Alright guys, so we're going to go and get started with the Ironroot Promethean. This one comes in at 100 proof. Grains used on this one are the red flint corn, non-GMO yellow corn, and rye whiskey. Let's go and get in the nose. So further into the glass, there is a lot of that corn influence. I do pick up a little bit of some sweet tobacco leaf, a little bit of burnt brown sugar. Further away from the glass, I kind of get this peppery kind of caramel there. Let's get into the palate, guys. Cheers. I really like the mouthfeel on this one. On the front of the palate, it really offers a lot of different baking spices. A little bit of some dried leather there. On the middle of the palate, it starts to open up to even more baking spices, more of that nutmeg, a little bit of paprika. I do get some of that corn influence there on the middle of the palate. It's almost like a little bit of like a burnt corn. And then back of the palate, more of a brown sugar and a little bit of some tobacco there. Medium finish on this one. Let's get a last sip, guys. Yeah, again, still kind of stay true to that. So definitely a lot of baking spices there on the front of the palate. Again, there's some nutmeg, there's some paprika. Middle of the palate, I mean, you start to get like some of that leather there. The flavors are really kind of playing around there. Some of that like maybe a slight hint still of that kind of like that burnt corn. Some brown sugar there still sitting there on the back of the palate. And then there's definitely some of that tobacco there. It sits there on the back of the palate, kind of slowly kind of pulls into the finish. But there is this kind of like slight kind of peppery note. It's more of like a white pepper there on the back of the palate that's mixing in with some of that tobacco. Really nice offering here from Ironroot. All right, guys, so we're gonna go and get into the Ironroot Harbinger. This one comes in at 115 proof. So this one uses purple corn, bloody butcher corn, flint corn, non-GMO yellow dent corn, and rye. Let's get in the nose. So this one has a really nice burnt brown sugar note, very, very deep and rich further into the glass. Further away from the glass, you get a slight little hint of that corn. I do kind of get almost like an aroma from like a pot still. I'm not 100% sure if any of this is pot still distilled. I couldn't find a lot of information about that or the mash bill itself, but I do get like a hint of like an aroma of like a pot still in there. Got a lot of creamy kind of caramel, some burnt brown sugar in there. There's definitely I pick up like a black tea. There's a little bit of like some earthiness to it. But that burnt brown sugar and tobacco note that I'm getting is more of the dominating aromas on this one. Smells wonderful, guys. Let's get into the palate. Wow, that has a really, really nice mouthfeel on that one. On the front of the palate, it is kind of more traditional. It is, some of those vanillas are in there, kind of muted a little bit. Some like burnt kind of caramel and burnt like leather almost. Sit across the middle of the palate there. Mild, very, very mild kind of corn influence on this one, but it's very creamy. It's very rich. On the back of the palate on this one, it's not as peppery as the Promethean was, but this is more like baking spice kind of dominated on the back of the palate. Like a little bit of saffron, definitely a little bit of like nutmeg and some cinnamon back there. So a lot of baking spices on this one, but they play more of a part on the back of the palate, not so much on the front and mid. Let's get in the second sip, guys. Yeah, that Harbinger has a lot of really nice oils to it. Like the viscosity. Again, more of your traditional kind of notes there. Some kind of muted vanillas. Almost like that burnt caramel. A little bit of like some burnt brown sugar there. A little bit of like some burnt, almost like leather. And then as that gets to the middle of the palate, you know, some of those baking spices kind of sit across the middle of the palate. I do start to pick up some of that saffron, some nutmeg. There's some cinnamon in there. Really, really good though. I mean, it's this one to me, I kind of favor over the Promethean. Promethean was great, but this one for me offers like a little bit more mouthfeel, a little bit more of that darkness. The flavors are a little more dominating and bold on this one. Again, another fantastic release here, guys, from Ironroot. All right, guys, so now we're going to go ahead and get into the Saints Alley. So Saints Alley is a partnership between Ironroot and YouTube's own liquor hound, Chris Trevino. They partnered up and created these Saints Alley releases. So this one here in front of me is the Nobleman Rye Whiskey. This one comes in at 107 proof, and from what I understand is finished in Tokai barrels. So this is a mixture of MGP whiskey and then Ironroot's own pot-stilled rye. Let's go ahead and get in the nose. So I do pick up a lot of baking spices on this one. There's definitely an array of baking spices here. Maybe a little bit of like some coriander. Again, it has that like a little bit of that like mintiness to it. But this one again has a really nice oakiness. Like there's an oakiness note to this one that really kind of stands out with some of those baking spices in there. Further into the glass, there is this like very kind of unique. It's almost like a very oaky kind of lemon baking spice combination that's going on there on the nose on this one. Lemon is not as dominant, but you do start to get some of that oakiness, and there's definitely some of those spices in there. Again, a slight hit of mintiness, some coriander. Lemon muted, but there is still a little bit of like, so it smells like it's going to be very creamy on the mouth. So let's get the palate, guys. Cheers. Exactly what I was thinking from the nose. This one offers a very creamy mouthfeel. And what I like about it is like the spiciness from it. Spiciness that you're getting from that rye. And maybe some of that, the influence from that Tokai. Some of that oakiness. It gives it this kind of like oaky rye spice bite there on the middle of the palate. But again, that rye, the rye itself is definitely present there, the grain. But I think with that Tokai, it offers like this, again, this aspect of that kind of like oakiness flavor that kind of, you know, mutes down that rye flavor a little bit. But there's a lot of other spices that start to appear on the palate here. Let's get a last sip, guys. I don't get as much mint, like the coriander or any. I don't get any kind of like star anise there or anything like that on the back of the palate. That rye kind of stands true to what it is. You know, utilizing that MGP and the pot stilled rye that's offered there from Ironroot. But I think that's what's kind of giving that the mouthfeel that I really wanted from this one. That creamy kind of viscous mouthfeel with all these different kind of flavors going on. It's almost like booze kind of soaked fruits, and then, you know, a very unique kind of oakiness with that rye that kind of mingles together there on the middle of the palate and into the back. Really like this Nobleman rye here, guys, from Saints Alley. All right, guys, so we're going to go ahead and get to the last sample. This is another one from Saints Alley. This is their Herald Edition number 2. So this one is finished utilizing Pinot de Charance and an Armagnac finish. Comes in at 107 proof. Let's get in the nose. I know I talked about some, so almost like some wine-soaked kind of fruits on the Nobleman on the palate, but that's what I'm really getting right now on this Herald. There is a lot of wine, kind of grape influence on here. I do pick up like a green grape, but it almost has a darker kind of side to it as well. It's almost like a green grape with like a purple wine that's just been soaked, in that green grape. A lot of fruitiness, a lot of bold fruitiness on this one. This is another one that smells like it's going to have a really nice mouthfeel. It has a lot of creaminess to it. It smells very dense and rich. Again, there's a lot of fruits on this one. I do pick up like a little bit of like a blueberry there on the nose. But again, it's like that purple grape, some dark plum maybe there further into the glass. Let's get into the palate, guys. Cheers. Wow, so this one really surprised me on the palate. So a lot of what I was getting on the nose is definitely there on the palate. You do get some of that kind of like green grape, but then all of a sudden it's like these like blackberries and plums start to like evolve there on the middle of the palate. On the back of the palate, a lot of that becomes kind of muted. And then you start to get, again, that's like some more like traditional kind of notes. Like you get some of those like kind of sweet caramels and sweet kind of vanillas there that flow into the back. It's not very spicy. It definitely doesn't drink 107 proof. But that initial burst of that, that fruitiness, and then all of a sudden that kind of wine influence and that dark kind of influence there, really kind of saturated the palate there on the front to mid palate. Let's get a last sip, guys. Cheers. I mean, that is just, that's as flavorful as they get right there. That may be one of my favorites that I tried. Again, I mean, just very, very dense and rich, very creamy, coats the mouth very well. Again, a lot of different fruits on this one. There's like a blueberry and a blackberry and a plum, green grape soaked in some like red wine. And then, middle of the palate and into the back, it kind of stays more that traditional. Those flavors are starting to trickle back there the more I kind of sip on it. This is probably my favorite release here, guys, from Saints Alley. I want to thank you guys for tuning into this episode of Dusty Dan's Whiskey Reviews. I want to send a big shout out to the team over at Ironroot for sending me these samples here, guys, to review on the channel. Again, a wonderful lineup and just such an array of flavors and aromas on these 4 whiskeys here. For me, I think the winner was probably the Herald. I mean, that was the one that really stood out. That had, to me, that kind of packed the most punch as far as flavor. But again, all of these guys, fantastic releases here from Ironroot, and again in partnership with Saints Alley. But again, I think, in my opinion, I think Texas has they've already laid their foundation here in the market. They've been doing some fantastic things. A lot of these Texas distilleries have been just pumping out some real like quality product across the board. So yes, they have definitely made a staple in the industry. They have already laid that foundation and building upon it now. Again, hats off to you, Ironroot here, for putting out some amazing stuff, guys. So if you're looking for more reviews like this, hit that subscribe button, bell notification to be alerted of any upcoming reviews or live streams. You also find me on Instagram at Dusty Dan's Whiskey Reviews. Till next time, guys, stay dusty.